Good morning. Welcome to our inaugural 2012-2013 edition of Windows on the World. It's my pleasure to introduce today for our first speaker, Dr. Harold Heie. Over the next year or two, one of the key themes of our Windows sessions and other things here in the university will be on how we can have respectful conversations about differences. I don't know if you've been watching the Republican and Democratic conventions. I've watched all of it. Well, not all of it, but a lot of it. And I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but I think on both sides of the aisle, what you see is it's pretty common to be careless in the way you describe the other side. That isn't true of everyone, but it is a problem. And one of the things we as Christians can't do is be careless like that with others who are created in the image of God, and that's why we have Harold Heie here to speak with us. Let me tell you a bit about Dr. Heie. He is a senior fellow at the Center for Christian Studies at Gordon College. He is also senior fellow at the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities. He's a member of the Board of Fellows for our Ph.D. program here in Eastern and Organizational Leadership. His background included stints as Vice President of Academic Affairs at Messiah College, also at Northwestern College. And he started out actually as an aerospace engineer and a mathematician. He taught at Gordon College and King's College in math. And it's pretty unusual in my experience to have people with PhDs in aerospace engineering talking about the deep humanity of connecting and talking at an effective level. But that's what we have in this case. He's written numerous books and articles, some co-edited, some co-authored. My favorite book is Learning to Listen, Ready to Talk, A Pilgrimage Towards Peacemaking, written in 2007. And if you want to, I'll just mention that one more time because I think it's worth a read. Learning to Listen, Ready to Talk. His title of his talk to us today is going to be Creating a Welcoming Space for Respectful Conversation at Eastern University. Join me in welcoming Dr. Heie.
Thank you, Dr. Sparks. I'm delighted to be here. I'm honored to be asked to be a part of this. It's good to see Betsy Morgan here. Betsy and I go back a long way. We were faculty members at the King's College back right after the Civil War, I think it was. Actually, I think it was in the late 60s. And Peter Jenko was with us, who I think many of you may also know. So it's great to be here. As mentioned already, the theme for my presentation is creating a welcoming space for respectful conversation at Eastern University. By the way, my talk will take 35 minutes, roughly, and then I'm going to allow time for you to ask questions for the remainder of the time. So we'll see how that goes. I'm appalled at the sad state of public discourse in contemporary society, especially in politics and the media, but also, sadly, in many churches and educational institutions. The engagement between persons who disagree with one another is increasingly shrill and nasty. Let me note three characteristics of this pernicious state of contemporary discourse. First, demonizing by name-calling. Rather than respectfully engaging someone who disagrees with us, it is all too common for us to dismiss or even demonize the other by calling him or her a name. He's a crazy conservative, a wild-eyed liberal, a free market nut, a socialist, a homophobe, a baby killer, a liar. To call someone a name is not a good way to start a conversation. In fact, we resort to such crudeness precisely because we don't want to engage in conversation. A second characteristic of broken public discourse is holding to fixed positions. One manifestation of this fixed positions model for discourse is the case where you can manage to get persons who disagree with one another into the same room. I submit as Exhibit A the typical TV talk show, where pundits line up on diametrically opposed sides of a given issue. Each pundit argues from a fixed position, with each pundit believing that he or she has captured the whole truth and nothing but the truth on the issue at hand. Each is impervious to the possibility of learning anything from the position of the other. Rather, each hopes to demolish the position of the other, to win the argument, all metaphors more appropriate to fighting a war than to having a genuine conversation. Such a confrontational fixed positions approach to engaging others in public discourse is not limited to TV talk shows. It's raging in the realm of politics. It is rampant in discussions on homosexuality that are tearing some Christian denominations apart. It is not uncommon in meetings of scholarly societies. It may even take place in some faculty meetings at Christian colleges or during some conversations on your campus. But there's another manifestation of the fixed positions model that is equally insidious. The case where you can't get people who disagree with one another into the same room. I call this third characteristic of broken public discourse listening only to an echo of yourself. In an opinion piece a few years ago in LA Times, Susan Jacoby tells of her experience of delivering a lecture on the history of American secularism at Eastern Kentucky University. Concurrent with her lecture, the Campus Crusade for Christ organization on campus had scheduled a competing lecture, reflecting their stated strategy, and I quote, to counter-program secular lectures on college campuses. As a result, both lectures were attended almost exclusively by persons who already agreed with the speaker. Jacoby's conclusion is that Americans today have become a people in search of validation for opinions they already hold, demonstrating a strong reluctance to give a fair hearing or any hearing at all to opposing points of view, wanting only to hear an echo of themselves. The internet and cable TV have surely magnified this tendency to only listen to an echo of yourself. Whatever your opinion about a given issue, you can go online and find volumes of support for your position. And if you find enough people online who agree with your viewpoint, it too easily serves to confirm your fixed position, and you are tempted to believe that your position must be true, even if it is blatantly false. And the same listening only to an echo of yourself takes place if you get your cable news exclusively from Fox News or MSNBC. An exclusive diet of either Sean Hannity or Ed Schultz will never lead you to entertain the possibility that your point of view on the issue at hand may be wrong, and that you may actually learn something by listening to someone who disagrees with you. The fixed positions model for discourse lies at one end of a spectrum. It is inhabited by those who generally want to get to the truth of the matter, which is commendable, but who are so convinced that they have captured the complete truth that they are not open to the possibility that they could be wrong about a few things and could learn from those who disagree with them. But at the other end of the spectrum are those who don't believe there is any truth at all relative to the matter at hand. As the late Charles Colson once said in the commencement address at Gordon College, there are those whose epistemology is captured in one word: whatever. A crass form of relativism in which any point of view on the issue at hand is judged to be as good as any other point of view. You have your beliefs, I have mine, so there really is nothing for us to talk about. My dream for you at Eastern University and for all CCCU schools is that your institution will become a beacon of light in this prevailing darkness of unacceptable extremes. My dream is that Eastern University and all CCCU schools will provide welcoming places that model a third way between the unacceptable extremes of fixed positions and relativism. My dream is that Eastern University and all CCCU schools will model being welcoming spaces for respectful face-to-face conversation among those who disagree with one another. How can an institution like Eastern University model such a third way between fixed positions and relativism? For the remainder of my presentation, I will propose a third way strategy and then suggest some preconditions for there to be any hope of that strategy having redemptive fruit. In stark contrast to the fixed positions model for discourse, I propose a strategy that I call a dialogic model for discourse that has 3 sequential steps. First step, the place to start, getting to know the person who disagrees with you. The political pundits who bash each other on TV talk shows probably do not know each other very well on a personal level. And it is all too easy to demonize a person you hardly know, or to dismiss him or her as stupid, biased, or evil. More name-calling. We may not be so quick to demonize others once we get to know them personally. I have a friend who, after making a presentation at a scholarly conference with which an attendee vehemently disagrees, he would take that person out to dinner to get to know him better. In that more casual setting, they not only talked about their differences about the topic at hand, but they also shared war stories about campus politics and soccer coaching tips for their children. They left the dinner table with differing perspectives on each other that opened the door for the second step in this dialogical model for discourse. Second step, try to understand why someone who disagrees with you takes a position that you believe to be wrong. The better you get to know someone, the better chance there is for you to come to understand why he or she believes as he or she does, as you uncover the experiences and the other various aspects of her social location that inform her beliefs on the issue at hand. She has reasons for her position that you need to understand. And likewise, she needs to understand your reasons for your position. You need to get to know her well enough so that you can empathize with where she is coming from, as they say, by putting yourself in her shoes. That doesn't mean that you have to agree with her beliefs. But is it possible that because of what she has experienced in her personal pilgrimage, she has seen something that you have missed? And likewise, is there something you see that she is missing? The chances of a fruitful conversation with her will be greatly enhanced if you adequately understand the basis for her beliefs, and likewise if she understands the basis for your beliefs by her getting to know you. Such mutual understanding can even help to build bonds of mutual trust that may enable you to talk through difficult issues about which you may vehemently disagree. The third step in a dialogical model for discourse: seek for mutual treasures by means of respectful conversation. Dr. Michael King, a Mennonite pastor and scholar, who's now the academic dean at Eastern Mennonite Seminary in Harrisonburg, Virginia, has proposed a provocative definition of what he calls genuine conversation, and I quote, "Genuine conversation involves a mutual quest for treasures in our own and the other's viewpoint. The first move is to make as clear as I can why I hold this position and why you might find in it treasure to value in your own quest for truth. The second move is to see the value in the other's view and to grow in my own understandings by incorporating as much of the other's perspective as I can without losing the integrity of my own convictions, end quote. Note carefully what King is and is not saying. After genuine conversation, you may conclude that there's very little, if any, treasure in the other person's position. But then again, you may find some unexpected treasures in the other person's position. You cannot tell until you talk. You cannot predict beforehand the results of a genuine conversation. Since I think that is probably the most important thing I will say this morning, let me repeat it. You cannot predict beforehand the results of a genuine conversation. That's why it drives me up a wall when politicians, especially in foreign policy area, say, let's talk to our enemies, but let's decide what the result has to be before we talk. As an aside, let me suggest a self-test that we can give ourselves. When you're about to engage a person about an issue concerning which you have some vehement disagreements, is your mindset to say, I'm going to seek for treasures in what that person has to say. That's a rigorous test, one that I have flunked many, many times. Another Mennonite scholar, Carolyn Schrock-Schenk, suggests that for extremely controversial topics, King's ideal for genuine conversation may be unrealistic. In seeking an answer to the question, what makes dialogue genuine, she first asks, does one need to be open to changing one's perspective or conviction about an issue? In her view, that readiness is the ideal, but it is rarely realistic when dealing with highly charged emotional issues. Rather, she believes that a minimum requirement for genuine conversation is a readiness to change or modify your perspective about the person or persons holding the opposite point of view. Note carefully what she is suggesting. The ideal is still the genuine conversation that Michael King hopes for. That through conversations, persons would be open to refining their perspectives on the issue at hand, in light of the treasures they discover in the perspectives of others. But given the current state of the debate amongst Christians regarding some highly controversial issues, that ideal may be unrealistic at this time. However, it is no small thing if at a minimum, those taking opposing sides in debating controversial issues will at least modify their perspectives on those who disagree with them as a result of dialogue with them. To be more specific, within the Christian community, those Christians taking opposite sides on a volatile issue may come to see that many of those on the other side are also deeply committed Christian, and that they also hold to biblical authority, but they differ in their interpretations of pertinent biblical passages. If they can see that, they will hopefully conclude that they can have Christian fellowship together, despite their disagreements. Attaining that sort of unity in fellowship, not uniformity in beliefs, would be no small accomplishment in our Christian churches, denominations, and colleges. Well, how naive can I be? All of what I've just said sounds like pie-in-the-sky wishful thinking. Is a dialogic model of discourse even thinkable in our brutish world of discourse that is dominated by the fixed positions model? Yes. But such dialogic discourse is viable only if certain preconditions are met. Preconditions that, interestingly enough, reflect some Christian virtues, which we Christians talk about much more than we practice. Before enumerating these preconditions, let me tell you a true, painful story. Not many years ago, a faculty member left another CCCU school under the cloud of a nasty theological dispute. His transgression was that he held to a theological position that, while not in contradiction with the core beliefs of the institution, led to a lot of unwanted bad publicity for the institution. Listen now to his painful description of the disrespect that he experienced. And I quote, "There are some people at this college and supporting denomination who are upset with some of my views. The most vociferous among them do not even want to discuss matters. They know they are right and that I am therefore a heretic, and that settles it. Some go so far as to claim that I'm not even a Christian. What troubles me is not that people disagree with some of my views. Rather, it is their lack of Christian virtue in carrying out their crusade. The innuendo, gossip, hearsay evidence, and even outright distortion of my views, coupled with political power plays made to ensure their victory, leave me wondering whether there is any place for thoughtful people in evangelical theology." End quote. These are strong words, but they're not spoken in the abstract. Note especially his grief over the lack of Christian virtue that he experienced. This leads me to propose some preconditions for there to be any hope of the dialogic model for discourse to be fruitful at Eastern University. The first precondition is humility. The conviction that as a finite, fallible human being, I do not fully understand truth as God knows it, and I can therefore learn from conversation with others, Christians or otherwise, who disagree with me. Such humility distinguishes between truth with a capital T and truth with a lowercase t. With truth with a capital T referring to the actual nature of things as God fully knows it, and truth with a lowercase t referring to the partial glimpse that a finite, fallible human being can grasp of truth with a capital T. At the same time that I believe there is truth with a capital T, I don't believe I typically have direct, unmediated access to that truth. At best, I can aspire to grasp a partial glimpse, for an aspect of the human condition is that we see through a glass darkly. 1 Corinthians 13:12. It appears to me that despite our rhetoric, humility is in very short supply among Christians. Such humility is not compromise. In respectful conversation, I will seek to express my commitment to certain truths with clarity and conviction. At the same time, I must be characterized by openness to the possibility that I am all wrong-headed about some of my present beliefs and need correction from others. In the process of give and take with those who disagree with me, I will try to present a persuasive case for the truth of my beliefs, but I must be open to the possibility that any aspect of my partial understanding of the truth, as God fully knows it, may need refinement. Another way of saying this is that scholars working out of the Christian faith perspective must embrace both poles of a rare combination, extremely rare, pointed to by Ian Barbour in his definition of religious maturity. I quote, "It is by no means easy to hold beliefs for which you would be willing to die." Now that's commitment in spades. It is by no means easy to hold beliefs for which you would be willing to die, and yet to remain open to new insights. But it is precisely such a combination of commitment and openness that constitutes religious maturity. This combination of commitment and openness that Barbour points to is a rare combination. Openness to the beliefs of others without commitment to your own beliefs too easily leads to sheer relativism. Commitment without openness too easily leads to fanaticism, even terrorism. As C.S. Lewis has observed, to which recent world events tragically testify, those who are readiest to die for a cause may easily become those who are readiest to kill for it. One of the most pressing needs in our world today is for all human beings, including scholars, to embrace and hold in tension both commitment and openness. So to summarize this first precondition of humility, it finds expression in a dual embracing of both commitment and openness, even to the point of entering into a conversation with someone who disagrees with you, with the rare attitude of wanting to seek for treasures in what the other person has to say, hoping, of course, that he or she will find treasures in what you have to say. But there are a few other preconditions expressible in terms of some other Christian virtues. The commitment pole of that rare combination of commitment and openness also points to the need for the virtue of courage, the boldness to accept the risks associated with honest advocacy of one's position. Individual courage requires the strength to freely speak one's convictions, even when one's opinions may be unpopular. Institutional courage requires that a college create safe spaces for faculty and administrators to freely disagree about important issues within the framework of the college's core beliefs, even if the college's supporting constituency is unhappy about that. Another precondition is patience. The hope that through ongoing respectful conversations, greater understanding will gradually emerge as a gift. Chris Hubner beautifully captures the essence of such patience in his observations about the nonviolent epistemology of the late distinguished Mennonite theologian John Howard Yoder. Hubner suggests that, quote, theology operates according to a violent logic of speed, whenever it is unwilling to risk the possibility that truthfulness is the outcome of ongoing, timeful, open conversation. In contrast, Yoder's nonviolent epistemology assumes that truthfulness is an utterly contingent gift that can only be given and received, and that it emerges at the site of vulnerable interchanges with the other. We must overcome our propensity, especially in evangelical circles, to want quick and simple answers to complex questions. Patience and humility need to be further complemented by love. Love, that enduring disposition of caring deeply for other persons, which includes providing a welcoming space for them to freely express their points of view. As 1 Corinthians 13:2 states, if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. Jesus Christ has called all Christians to love others. My commitment to orchestrating respectful conversations with others is my deep-rooted response to that call. If members of the Eastern University community make a common commitment to be characterized by these virtues, when you engage those with whom you disagree, then there is hope for the strategy of dialogic discourse to lead to a rich redemptive harvest within your community by means of numerous respectful conversations that would facilitate your learning from those with whom you disagree. Lest you miss it, let me assert emphatically what I've already hinted at. What I've shared with you this morning is not peripheral to my understanding of my Christian faith. It is a centerpiece of how I believe I am called to live out my Christian faith. Jesus has called me to love others, and my commitment to engaging those who disagree with me in respectful dialogic discourse, exhibiting the preconditions of humility, courage, patience, and love, is a deep expression of my response to that call. Lest all this seem too theoretical and abstract and maybe impossible, let me close by making a concrete suggestion for a possible topic and venue for you at Eastern University to orchestrate a respectful conversation. I recommend that you design a college-wide conversation that deals with an important contemporary issue. And if I may be so presumptuous, since I fly back to Iowa this afternoon, I would like to recommend a topic for you to start with this fall that fits nicely with the fact that this is a presidential election year. And this topic deals with a commitment that is near and dear to Eastern University, a commitment to the justice focus in your threefold aspiration to help your students to, quote, grow in faith, learn to reason, and help bring justice, end quote. To be sure, the meaning of justice is multifaceted, but at a minimum it includes assisting the most vulnerable members of our society. The words of Jesus revealed in Matthew 25 present a clarion call for Christians to feed the hungry, provide drink for the thirsty, welcome the stranger, clothe the naked, care for the sick, and visit those in prison. Contrary to the invective that spews forth from the extremes of both political parties, I know for a fact that there actually are Christians on both sides of the political aisle who agree on the goal of doing justice for the most needy among us. Their disagreements are typically more about the best means to accomplish that worthy end. In grossly oversimplified terms, some see charity and the workings of the free market system as the best means. Others believe that the problems faced by the most vulnerable among us are simply too great to be addressed only by charity, and government needs to provide a strong safety net for those who do not fare well in the market economy. In light of such strong disagreements, here is a good question for students and faculty at Eastern University to consider as the November elections approach. What is the proper role of government, if any, in helping to bring about justice for the most marginalized, vulnerable, and needy members of our society? Your answer to that question is crucial as you go to the polls in November. And there is room for equally committed Christians to disagree in their responses to this question. I encourage the students, faculty, and staff of Eastern University to engage in a very stimulating and hopefully respectful conversation about this thorny question. But what is the best venue for such a conversation? The first answer that comes to mind, especially among faculty, is the classroom. But which class? In which department? Even if you could identify multiple classes as potential venues, how about those many students who will never set foot in those classes? If I may be so bold, I think this question is too important to limit to a few courses in your curriculum. I would recommend that you consider the possibility of creating a campus-wide, out-of-class or co-curricular venue for such a conversation. And to be even more radical, I would recommend that you consider the possibility of turning over the design and implementation of such a campus-wide conversation to your student body. Lest you think I've absolutely lost my mind when I make this suggestion that you entrust your students with the responsibility to design a campus-wide conversation on this important issue, let me give you a real example of where this has worked to an admirable degree. In 1998, the Center for Christian Studies at Gordon College, which I used to direct, inaugurated an annual Gordon College Symposium, for which classes were canceled for a day, and campus-wide conversations were orchestrated around an important interdisciplinary issue, with participation in these conversations being mostly voluntary, although some chapel credits could be obtained for a limited number of events. It didn't start well for two reasons. First, all the planning for the first symposium was top-down, carried out by faculty and a few co-curricular staff members. Second, on the first day of such canceled classes, it was a beautiful, sunny 85-degree day in April, and Gordon College is only 1.5 miles from a splendid beach on the Atlantic Ocean. A new idea then occurred to us. After an interdisciplinary theme is announced for a given year, turn the students loose to design symposium sessions that they judge to be pertinent to the given theme. The enthusiastic student response has been overwhelming. The sessions students have come up with over the past 14 years have included lecture-type presentations, but with the change that students were at the lectern and the faculty were in the student chairs. Poetry readings, a panel of students from a given class dealing with the interdisciplinary issue as it relates to the course material for that class, musical compositions, art exhibits, and other venues as varied as the imaginations of students, including a pig roast on the quad one year. And to this day, I don't have a clue as to how that pig roast was related to the announced theme. But we were easy. If students thought it was related, we said, go for it. This symposium has now expanded from just one full day of concurrent events in a given year to include events planned for each evening of that week as well. This annual event has featured as many as 70 student-initiated projects over the one-week period, with conversations about the materials presented expected as part of each design. Total student attendance for the week has exceeded 3,000 for a student body of 1,500. The total cost for this week of events is minimal, since it typically involves no outside speakers. It is a co-curricular vehicle for students to take more responsibility for their own learning and for making students, co-curricular staff, and faculty equal co-partners in the educational process. But whatever topic you choose for discussion, and whatever venues you decide upon for such conversation, I would recommend that you publish up front a manifesto as to the guidelines that should govern such discussion. You see, you can't take these guidelines for granted. You have to state them up front to promote respectful conversation. In light of what I've shared with you today, if I were writing such a manifesto, which you maybe can be thankful I will not be doing, it would read something like the following. I presumptuously call this the Eastern University ideal for conversation with others. It has 5 bullets, or as my Mennonite friends say, Harold, I wish you would call them pearls instead of bullets. Anyway, here are the 5 elements of my manifesto. First, I will try to listen well, providing each person with a welcoming space to express her perspective on the issue at hand. Second, I will seek to empathetically understand the reasons another person has for her perspective. Third, I will express my perspective and my reasons for holding my perspective with commitment and conviction, but with a non-coercive style that invites conversation with a person who disagrees with me. Fourth, in my conversation with a person who disagrees with me, I will explore whether we can find some common ground that can further the conversation. But if we cannot find common ground, I will conclude that we can only agree to disagree. And yet I will do so in a way that demonstrates respect for the other and concern for her well-being and does not foreclose the possibility of future conversations. And fifthly and last, in aspiring to these ideals for conversation, I will also aspire, by the grace of God, to be characterized by humility, courage, patience, and love. Thank you for your attention. Well, according to my trusty Timex, we have, the lighting here is not too good. We have about 10 minutes for questions. 10 minutes. So if any of you have any questions you want to ask, just blurt them out and try to speak loudly. And if some of you have to go, I will not be offended. And by the way, if some of you don't have to go in 10 minutes, I'll be happy to even answer other questions up front if you so desire. Anyone like to pose a question about what I said or didn't say? Yes.
People have differed passionately about important issues for probably all time. Why is it so difficult now? Why is it
Yeah. Well, you know, it depends on who you ask as to whether it's more difficult now. You know, George Will, a political pundit, says, what's new? It's always been like this in the history of America. But, you know, I haven't lived throughout that history, but I've lived through enough of it to sense that it's more extreme now. And it's simply part of the cultural ethos, it seems. You know, how it got that way, I'm not sure. But you know, you can't tune into public conversations without realizing that people are just not interested in talking to each other and learning from each other. So, you know, I'm not enough of an historian to know, you know, the ebb and flow of how severe this problem has been. It's just that in my lifetime, I've never seen it as severe as it is now. And even if I don't have good explanation as to why it is so severe, one of my commitments is to try to model a better way to do it. Maybe someone else has a point of view as to why it seems to be so severe now. I mean, you know, I have a response for the area of politics, if you'd like to hear it. You know, the root problem with politics, in my view, is that politics has become about getting elected, not about governing. Now, you see, if politics is about getting elected, then incivility works. I mean, there's ample evidence that negative advertising, bashing the other, helps you get votes. So if politics is about getting elected, which I think it has become by and large, unfortunately, then that explains why a lack of respectful conversation abounds. But if politics could become about governing, if people could view the purpose of politics to govern well, then civility is absolutely necessary. Because people on both sides of the aisle can't govern well unless they talk to each other and seek to find common ground that will inform their governing. So I mean, that's my response in the political arena to your question. I think politics has become so entrenched in the idea that our purpose is to get elected, and has missed the root idea, I think, that our purpose is to govern well, that incivility works nowadays in politics, because politics is focusing on the wrong thing. Did you have a question? You had your hand? Okay.
I was going to make a comment about what you said. My grandma would always say, you can't have an opinion about everything. That's what she would always tell me. And we kind of just lived with that.
I didn't hear that. What did you say?
You can't have an opinion about everything.
You can't have an opinion.
An opinion about everything.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess now we just have so much information.
Yeah.
And we can have an opinion about it.
Yeah, yeah. And worse than that, we can have our own set of facts. You know, I mean, it used to be we would say, well, you're entitled to your own opinion about values. Now it seems you're entitled to your own opinion about facts. And that really muddies the waters, makes it complicated. Another question, way in back.
This is a great conversation. First of all, thank you. In the context of organizations, how do you push forward this idea of creating a safe space, especially if you're not in a place of authority or power, and you feel the need for a safe place for dialogue, but you don't have the authority or the power to make that happen?
Yeah. Well, it depends on whether you think those in authority or power are interested in making that happen. I mean, I think you try to present a persuasive case as an educator that what you're pushing for, creating a welcome space for respectful conversation, is essential to good education. I think it is. And so you try to present a persuasive case for the need for this as integral to what we say we're about as an educational institution. Now, if those in authority and power don't agree with that, I guess what I would say is I'm a great believer in pilot projects. I worked for 13 years as a chief academic officer, and I found out soon enough that it's difficult in the abstract to convince an institution to do almost anything, to get faculty-wide, administration-wide agreement about a project you're interested in. But it is not impossible to say, here's an idea, I'd like to try it out. Can I have the space and the room to try it out and see how it works? And so I think if I was working for an administration, I don't know your situation, so I'm not commenting at all about anything I know about Eastern University or any other place. But if I were hypothetically in a situation where I had a passion for what I've said this morning, but I felt that those I report to, or those I'm responsible for, do not share my passion, I would simply propose a pilot project. I would say, let's try it. Could we have a student-wide conversation about this issue, and let's see how it works, and invite them to attend. And hopefully they will see that great education is going on in such a forum. Anyone? Yes?
First, thank you very much. And I also commend this book that was mentioned earlier. It seems that in a lot of these conversations, the reason for lack of charity, let's say, is that the two sides are fueled by anger.
Right.
But that underneath that anger, there's fear. Usually that if I agree with you, this is my personal statement, if I agree with this other person, I'm going to lose something.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to give up something that's precious to me. How do we go about addressing that fear, both within ourselves and also helping other people think through
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I mean, yes, I may lose something in the sense that I will not come out of the conversation with all I hoped for, see, which was that the other person would see things the way I see them. But I will not, there's nothing to fear if I dare to believe that I will come out of the conversation having my perspective enriched by what the other person says. So I will come out with an improvement on what I now believe. So I think you've put your finger on a real problem, that a lot of it is motivated by fear. Now in the political arena, which is the arena that I'm most interested in these days, it's a failure to realize that politics is not a full loaf enterprise. If you go into politics thinking that I have to have my full loaf, well, that'll never happen. And the gridlock we experience today is because extremes on both sides only want the full loaf. And it's either the full loaf or nothing. Now, politics is a half a loaf enterprise. And so I think you have to go into it saying to yourself, well, I may not come out of the legislative deliberation process with everything I hoped for, but I'll come out with enough of what I hoped for to keep me going. And even more grandiose, I may come out with something that's better than what I hoped for. Because I was listening to what my opponents said, and they had some good insights that will make my position even stronger. Now talk about naivete, that takes the cake.
Thank you, Dr. Heie. I love his idea. I love his idea about God's big T truth and our small t truth, although maybe his little t is bigger than mine. Okay. Anyway, I just want to let you know that he does have a website called www.respectfulconversation.net. That's respectfulconversation.net. I'd suggest that you go have a look at all sorts of resources for the sorts of things he's talked about to facilitate thoughtful dialogue on that site. In addition, there will be a luncheon held, Nancy, what time? 11:30? 11:30 in Baird Library for those who want to come and sit and talk to Dr. Heie. But it was great to have you, and we very much appreciate it. And I will not control, but will facilitate an opportunity for students to follow through on your challenge today. Thank you. You're dismissed.